Chapter 31. Rogers hop up the walk to Little Roc's front door turned his stream of questions into a verbose roller coaster. "How did you know Little Roc would get a phone call?" read his words on his uprising. "How did you know who it would be?" they read on his descent. "How did you know Little Roc picked up a package?" Up. "Do you know what's inside it?" Down. "What do we tell Little Roc once we're inside?" Up. "Who does the talking?" Down. I got motion sickness just reading him. I slapped my hand over his mouth to shut him up, and scrambled his wavy words so Little Roc wouldn't see them and get wise to our play. I shoved the rabbit behind me where he wouldn't get in my way, and rang the bell. Little Roc opened the door, and stood there staring at me, with his mouth open about as wide as first hole on a championship putting green. "Yes, oh, Valiant, wasn't it? What are you doing here?" He fluttered a hand. "I'm so sorry, but I'm just in the middle of something. Could you possibly come back later? Say tomorrow. Tomorrow would be just perfect. See you then." He started to shut the door on me, but I pushed past him into the house. Roger bounced along after me, and Little Roc brought up the rear. "Here now, exactly what do you think you're doing?" Little Roc babbled. "You can't come in here." "Too late," I countered. "I already am in, and you're in too. In deep, serious trouble." Little Roc's Adam's apple gulped through a series of moves good enough for first place in a yo-yo tournament. "I know what you've got going with Carol Masters and Sid Sleaze," I stated. "I don't understand what you mean," he retorted lamely. "Sid Sleaze? Who's Sid Sleaze?" "He's the guy whose office you visited not half an hour ago." I pointed at Roger. "Want me to have my assistant here play back a videotape of that event?" Roger showed some of that quick wit that made him such a hot property in the comic biz, and picked up on my bluff. "I can have the machine set up and rolling in 5 minutes, Chief," he said. Little Roc looked from one of us to the other for the slightest sign of a shuck, but both of us held fast. "Oh, that's it, Sleaze," he said finally. "Of course, now I know who you mean. I had some minor business dealings with the man. Nothing significant. He wanted to buy some things from the gallery." I put out my hand. "Let's have it." "Have what?" asked Little Roc. "The envelope you got from Sleaze." "What envelope?" he said in an air of innocence unbelievable in anybody this side of Dundee. "Come on, don't play cutesy with me. I know what's in that envelope. You either give it to me, or I phone the cops and you give it to them. Believe me, you got a lot better chance with me. I'm not really interested in your scam. I'm out to nab your old man's murderer. You help me do that, and I don't care if you bilk the entire Western world, but I have a hunch the cops aren't quite so open-minded. Now give!" He caved in easily, but wimps like him always do. He scuttled into his den, came back, and gave me a standard 8x10 manila envelope. I opened it and unceremoniously dumped the contents onto a coffee table. As I suspected, it contained at least 3 dozen negatives. I picked a few at random and held them up to the light. Sure enough, they were the negatives of Rocco DeGrisi's missing artwork. As nearly as I could tell, there were at least 6 sets of negatives for each piece. "Take a look," I said to Roger. "You once told me you could tell reproduction negatives from originals. Which are these?" Each time Roger held one up and examined it, he gave out with a low whistle of admiration, until there were so many notes floating around, the room looked like the site of yesterday's Canary Convention. "I've never seen anything like this," he said when he finished. "These are absolutely perfect. No graininess, no fuzzy images, no degradation of color. They all look exactly like originals to me." "Want to tell us about these?" I asked Little Roc. Little Roc went to the bar and mixed himself a drink from out of a rainbow assortment of bottles that duplicated the ones he kept in his gallery office. I don't know what color he was shooting for, but he built and threw away 3 drinks, all of which turned out jet black, before he finally gave up and tossed down a straight shot of plain, garden variety see-through vodka. Carol Masters and I vowed to avenge ourselves on my father for the unjust way he treated us, so we decided to sell a number of pieces we removed from the gallery. That's a rather genteel way of phrasing it, I said. You didn't just remove them, you stole them, plain and simple. There was no way he was going to convince me otherwise, but by golly if he didn't try. We did not view ourselves as criminals, Mr. Valiant. We took Carol's works and hers alone. We both felt she was entitled to profit from their increased value. She saw nothing morally wrong in her doing so, and in my getting a cut for helping her. I know a rabbi, 6 ministers, and a pope who might give you an argument on that, especially when you take into account what you eventually did with them. Still no mea culpa. That was Carol's idea, not mine. Carol's. Rather than sell them once, she reasoned, why not duplicate them and sell them multiple times? I told her it was an admirable idea, but would never work. We had the original negative, so we could easily produce more prints, but each framed work had to include both a print and the negative it came from. Since we only had one negative, that was impossible. We couldn't use a normal dupe neg. Any knowledgeable collector would spot it in an instant. That's when Carol suggested Sid Sleaze. Carol had worked with Sleaze years earlier, when he still went by the name of Baumgartner. He kept in contact with her through the years, trying to get her to go back to work for him. One day over lunch, he told her about a new process he developed to reproduce negatives so perfectly that not even an expert could tell duplicates from originals. If it worked as well as he led Carol to believe it would, it presented the perfect solution to our problem. Carol approached him with our proposal. In return, for a flat fee per piece, he was to take our original negatives and turn out duplicates in limited quantity. I framed the duplicate prints and negatives together, and Carol signed them. We then sold them as originals through shady dealers like Hmmm Toner. The word must have gotten around that these pieces had been stolen from your gallery. To be sure, the police circulated photos and complete descriptions throughout the world. Your fences have any problems finding buyers under those conditions? None whatsoever. There are any number of collectors who care not a whit about a work's provenance. If they want to possess it, they will, stolen or not. How many of these duplicates did you sell? We limited ourselves to 15 copies of each work. Any more than that, and we run the risk of exposing our ploy. Our buyers weren't about to display stolen works openly, but they might show them to a close friend or two. Sooner or later, someone was bound to see the same supposed original in 2 collections. At that point, values would plummet, suspicions would rise, and angry buyers would begin tracing their way back through the dealers to Carol and me. An altogether ugly situation. We fully intended to be out of it before that happened. You plan to use the money from this deal to bankroll the startup of your own cartoon syndicate? Yes. In fact, I had already approached my father through an intermediary with an offer to buy up the contract of a tune I could use as the cornerstone of my new enterprise. That intermediary, I said, was Sid Sleaze, going by his real name, Sid Baumgartner. Correct, said Little Roc. The character you were after, I continued, was Roger Rabbit. Correct again, but father refused to sell. I considered myself a very astute judge of tune talent, bragged Little Roc. I told father many times that Roger Rabbit was one of the most talented tune in the DeGreasy stable. I told father over and over that Roger should get a strip of his own. Father refused to listen. He wouldn't star the rabbit, nor would he turn him loose. I always suspected it had something to do with Jessica." "You mean Rocco used Roger to hold on to Jessica?" interrupted Roger. Why did that rabbit refuse to give up his dogged belief that Jessica loved him when anybody with even half a brain could tell otherwise? "So long as Rocco kept the rabbit, he kept Jessica too." "So it appeared," said Little Roc, sending Roger's spirits soaring to the moon. "Jessica would never had stayed with him of her own free will. Jessica did not love my father. How could she? She was so cultured and refined, and he was such a bore. No, she loved someone else. That was quite obvious to even the casual observer." Roger beamed, but not for long. "Jessica loved me," said Little Roc, and Roger's self-proclaimed hard-shell exterior flattened out quicker than a turtle out for a Sunday stroll on the Golden State Freeway. "That's the other reason I got involved with this nefarious scheme," said Little Roc. "For Jessica. She never said this in so many words, but she certainly led me to believe that, if I ever became independently wealthy, she would leave Father in a flash, no matter what he did to stop her, and would run away with me." "To a grass hut on some tropical island where you would both eat coconuts, never wear clothes, and live happily ever after," I said. "It never occurred to you that a guy with your old man's clout could track you to Timbuktu and haul you back?" Judging from the look on his face, it never had. I'm constantly amazed how people kid themselves into believing love can conquer all. I didn't want Roger to hear my next line of questions, so I trumped up a dangerous assignment for him. "Who is that?" I asked, pointing toward the window. "Out there! Somebody's out there! We're being watched!" "We are?" said Roger and Little Roc almost in unison. I pulled Roger to me. "You wanted action? Here's your chance. Go outside and collar that snoop. Just remember, this isn't make-believe. Whoever's out there is playing hardball, and he's playing for keeps." The rabbit nodded bravely. If you didn't count the garbage can he tipped over on the way, you could say he slipped silently out the back door. "Rocco called you the night he died," I started to Little Roc after the rabbit was out of earshot. "Why?" "To tell me he knew about my forgery scheme. He ordered me to come to the house immediately to discuss it with him." "Did you go?" "No, I didn't. I'm not a courageous man by nature, Mr. Valiant," he said, stating the obvious. "The thought of facing my father in full fury was more than I could handle. Instead, I came home, got thoroughly swacked, and passed out on the living room floor." That I could believe. He was so chicken he probably got homesick walking by a Colonel Sanders. Now came the part I didn't want Roger to hear. "How did Rocco use the rabbit to hang on to Jessica?" "It's a mystery to me. There appeared to be a connection there, but I could never figure it out, and I didn't want to risk offending Jessica by asking her outright." Holding on to Roger would have worked if Jessica had loved the rabbit. You say you're pretty close to her. Did she? Did she ever love the rabbit? Little Roc tittered. "Heavens, no. Who in their right mind could love a rabbit?" Roger crept by the window. He had gotten hold of a knife somewhere and had clenched it firmly between his teeth. If he bumped into a tree, he would slit his own throat. Never a stand of timber around when you need one. "Jessica despised Roger," said Little Roc. "She told me so many times. She dated him once, as a lark. She had no intention of getting serious with him. Then, totally out of the blue, she experienced an overwhelming urge to marry the furry fellow. She was never able to really explain it. It just came over her, too strongly to resist, like an uncontrollable itch. She said later that it was as though she had been bewitched. She struggled every day for a year to break the mysterious hold the bunny seemed to have over her. Finally, one day, just as quickly as it came, her obsession vanished, and she managed to break free of Roger's spell. She packed her bags immediately and walked out on the rabbit, without so much as a backward glance. She came back here to be near me, she said. While she played up to my father, it was really me she loved. It was a glorious period in my life. We went to dinner together, and to plays, and dancing. We even shared her new hobby. What was that? Shortly after her return, Jessica became interested in Toon mythology. We signed up for a course in it together at City College. She ever give you any reason for her interest? No, but it certainly fascinated her. She and I went to the university together almost every night to use their reference library. I delighted in it, because it gave me a chance to be close to her. It was one of the happiest periods of my life, he repeated. Was she interested in any particular aspect of Toon mythology? Yes, as a matter of fact, she was. Magic lanterns. She read every work she could find on magic lanterns. Roger came in the back door. When he opened his mouth to speak, the knife fell out and nearly cut off his toe. I don't know why he wanted a job with more danger in it. He created enough for himself on his own. I checked around out there, Eddie, but I couldn't find a thing. He might have gone away for reinforcements, I said. We'd better take it on the lam before he gets back. I headed for the front door. Are you going to turn me in? Said Lil Roc plaintively to my back. I told him what I had told Carol Masters. Maybe yes, maybe no, depending on how well he played along from here on in. He didn't take it any better than she had, to which I delivered my usual response, tough.